Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Evolved Man Masterclass. Today, I'm super excited to have with me a special guest, Matt Schneider. Welcome, Matt.
Everybody must be special guests on these summits.
I mean, it's true. You're part of the summit, so it makes you very special.
Very special.
But I'm excited to have you, as you are the co-founder of the City Dads Group, a community of more than 10,000 fathers in 34 cities across the U.S. You work with reporters, brands, entertainment companies to encourage more accurate and positive portrayals of father and fatherhood in media and advertising. And you also host your own podcast, the Modern Dads Podcast, to help parents navigate work, parenthood, relationships, and play. So we've got a lot to dig into today. So let's get started. Your origin story, your superhero origin story. You weren't always an advocate for fatherhood. How did you get into this game?
You know, I have to give all the credit to my business partner, Lance Sommerfeld. We were teachers before we were dads, and I took what I thought would be a year off from teaching to stay at home with our first son, and spent 3 years kind of on my own. He decided to follow in my footsteps to stay at home when his first son was born, right around the same time we were having our second. And he looked at me and said, "What have you been doing in New York City for the last 3 years? Everything is for moms. Mommy and me play groups, mommy and me music classes, mommy and me gym classes, yoga classes, dance classes, everything." And I, of course, said, "I've been hanging out with moms and nannies." And didn't see a problem at the time, but he was much more proactive than I am, especially socially, and wanted to start a dads group and try to connect what we thought would be at-home dads in New York City. So he started NYC Dads Group on Meetup. It'll be 10 years ago in November, and asked me to join the ride along with him. And ever since, we've been partners in crime and been having fun every day.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And now you've got like 10,000 fathers. I mean, did you ever imagine it could ever grow like that? It's probably tough to imagine that, right?
Well, certainly we did not think about it 10 years ago with NYC Dads Group. We knew that we were two at-home dads in New York City, and we saw other dads around the city. And then we started to realize it wasn't just at-home dads that wanted to connect with other dads. It was every dad that was engaged and active with his kids. So we started to see, even just in New York City, that dads of all stripes were excited about being part of our group and meeting up with other dads. And about 5 years ago, we had some interest from guys in other city to get started, and LA Dads Group and Chicago Dads Group were born, and decided to create this umbrella City Dads Group. And it's been a little crazy ever since. As you said, 34 cities. That's 34 organizer teams across the country that we're trying to really provide the resources to create communities for those dads.
All right. It's amazing. It's amazing. I know I look forward to joining the ranks. I've got, a little one that I'm expecting any day now. So excited to join the group as well. What can I expect upon joining the City Dads Group?
Well, we actually have dads join. Even at your stage, they want to meet up with other dads, and that's, I think, the best part of what we're doing is you can meet other dads that have babies. You can also meet some dads that are a few steps ahead of you in the process. Lance, my business partner, always talks about being able to call me when his first son was born and ask, "My kid just crawled out of his crib. What am I supposed to do?" Or, "My kid won't eat this. What am I supposed to do?" And we don't really call ourselves a support group. We don't really signal that we're there to be there for each other. But inevitably, as we gather together, we are talking about the same things that moms are talking about. What are our kids eating? What stroller do you have? What do you take in your diaper bag on a daily basis to make sure you've got everything you need? So that's the fun part, is really bringing the resources to dads that moms have kind of naturally created for themselves.
Awesome. What advice do you have for a new dad? I mean, just since I can selfishly ask here.
Get in the mix as soon as possible. Fatherhood does not start when your kid starts Little League. It starts right away. And especially if you're in a relationship with a partner, We talk about kind of partnership parenting all the time, and really trying to be in this together fully. It's not rocket science. There's nothing about parenting that's rocket science. It's about practice and getting your hands dirty, literally. So whether it be changing diapers or giving baths, changing clothes, supporting your partner through breastfeeding, if that's going on, there's any number of ways to really be a dad. And it starts right from day one. It's really already started. If your partner, if you're with a woman who's pregnant, then you know your job as dad and parenting partner has already started.
Yep. Yeah, we just made the last minute call to get a doula because I knew my wife needed some support in there, that I did not want to totally be the only person involved in that, and feel very good about that decision to provide her more support and feel like I'm doing the right thing by doing that.
We had a doula also, and it was fantastic to have somebody in the room that had been through the birthing process before. Doctors really are not in the room very much of the time. Nurses are not very in the room much of the time. So having somebody that can really kind of be a coach for you, and it's support, of course, first and foremost for the pregnant mom, but it's a great resource to have for a dad as well, and really tag team in supporting the birth process, and make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing.
Yeah, not freaking out. That's what I need to. That's what
You're not freaking out. You're not the one going through the medical process. You're the one there to keep your head on straight.
All right. Let's hope I can do it. Let's shift gears a little bit. How has I know you've been doing this for 10 years, and I know the landscape of fatherhood has changed over the years. I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of fatherhood to date, and then kind of where you see the future of it.
I have been saying for a while now, and I'll say it to this day, I think this is the best time in the history of the world to be a dad. The definition of what it means to be a dad has changed so much, even just in a generation. My dad did, like most dads do, considered his primary role to be breadwinner for his family, and my mom kind of took care of the rest. I had a fairly traditional upbringing, not to say my dad wasn't a great dad. We played catch and we played games and all that, but my dad wasn't that involved in figuring out what sports league I was going to be a part of or which doctor I was going to see.
My dad describes his parenting style as benign neglect. It's like, okay.
So, I mean, we get to be fully engaged and involved in our kids' life. And that means something. When you're there for those earliest moments, even of changing a diaper or at those pediatrician appointments, you're starting to build that bond and build that relationship. And that means so much to really, as a man and as a father, to be part of that, and not just turn that over to someone else, whether it be your wife or anybody else raising your kids. It's nice to really be at the center. And I think dads have a real opportunity now, more than ever before, to be at the center of their kids' life.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, just since I'm in the birth zone, if you look at a generation ago, like men weren't often, in the birth room, and now they got a place front and center. So, and that I think is in even historical context, that's pretty new too. So it's kind of a metaphor about what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think even you think about a lot of the work we've been doing is dads in the media. 10 years ago, many brands were using dads as kind of the fool, the buffoon in any ad. Moms are the heroes. Dads are the buffoons that we need to save our children from this guy who can't change a diaper or can't manage to feed his kid without making a mess. And we actually,
Mr. Mom, that classic.
Yes. And that just wasn't representing the dads that we were seeing in our group 10 years ago in New York City, and the dads that we were meeting across the country. So we started to kind of use social media to knock on companies' doors and say, "Hey, that's not us." And meanwhile, it's not us. It's also not good for women to have you representing their partners in parenting as buffoons. I never dare to speak for women, but I think most women, if they have a parenting partner, want a real partner, and they need the society to recognize that dads are there buying strollers and diapers and cars and all that kind of stuff for their families as much as moms are.
So have we reached the pinnacle of dad evolution, or is there what's the next stage?
We have plenty of work to do. I think we've come a long way in the marketing world. I think dads generally are portrayed very well, and meanwhile not as heroes. Nobody's suggesting that dads are better parents or that we are heroic for being able to change a diaper. It's quite the opposite. The bar is set pretty low for dads. We're not expected to be able to do anything. So anytime we actually do something, and you'll see this when you go out into the world on your own, you'll have people complimenting you for being a great dad because you managed to get through a meal with your child on your own. And really, that's not a high bar to meet. So I think we still have a lot of work to do for dads and the expectations that others have for us, sometimes that we have for ourselves. Another big place we have a lot of work to do, I think, is in the workplace. Okay. Dads, if you look at any study about kind of moms and dads in the workplace, moms are penalized or women are penalized when they become moms, and dads are actually rewarded. Dads end up working more hours per week when they become, or men work more hours a week when they become dads. The theory goes that because they can't lose that job, they need to keep that job, and they're working more hours, and the workplace actually values them and views them as employees that are going to stick around when they become dads. Meanwhile, you know what happens for moms in the workplace. And the dads that I know, and more dads are saying it out loud, I want to be good at my job, but I also want to be a good dad. So I think, have a real opportunity to join women in the fight they've been waging for the last 3-4 decades in making sure that workplaces start to adjust to the lives, not only of parents, but the lives of anybody that has something to take care of outside of work. And it's funny to have to say that we're at a time where the workplace has to recognize that we're not just employees. We are people who have children. We're people that have aging parents. We have hobbies. We have things that we'd like to do outside of work. So men, I think, are recognizing that on all fronts.
How are we going to maximize profits if we're giving people time off to live their lives? That's crazy talk.
Well, I do think the companies, of course, it sounds like crazy talk, but I think we have gone through a cycle where companies did try to squeeze people dry. And I think they are realizing that we're going to get more from employees if they're whole people versus simply working them to the bone that they can't function and they're not good. And we of course know that somebody's going to come to work with fresher ideas, better at their jobs if they've had time away. So I think managers and leaders are going to recognize that.
All right. What's an example of some of the influence that you've tried to impart on the media? I'm just trying to think about like some examples to drive that home and illustrate it.
The most prominent example is now quite a while ago, but Huggies, the diaper brand, right? Many years, about 5-6 years ago, had a commercial where they put a bunch of dads, 5 or 6 dads, in a house for the weekend with their kids. And they were calling this the put our diapers to the test, the true test. Dads alone with their kids. And that had this kind of laughing guy, like, of course, these diapers will stand up to not being changed for 12 hours in a row, or the blowout, or whatever else. and this real mocking tone of this, our diapers can stand up to anything. And it happened to, that campaign happened to align with kind of the rise of Twitter and social media, where we were able to actually kind of connect with the brand and post that this is not representative of the dads that we know. And we had a lot of dads in our community join in, and other kind of dad bloggers and people that had a voice. And Huggies actually listened. We were at a conference. There's a great conference that had just started called the Dad 2.0 Summit, of people kind of out in the world thinking and talking about dads and marketers. And Huggies actually came down to Austin, where we were having the conference. People from Huggies, people from their PR company, people from their advertising agency that had conceived of the campaign, and they listened. They listened to all of us talk about how that isn't a good representation of dads. How it's not going to help you sell more diapers to make fun of dads. Women don't like it when you're making fun of their partners. They might get a laugh, but they don't like it. Right. And they actually listened and scrapped a lot of the campaign. They re-filmed it, re-voiced it, threw a lot of stuff out, and we've had a great relationship with them ever since. And I think we always try to kind of come to the table in a respectful way. Right. We're not trying to knock people, individuals. We're trying to change the way that these guys sitting around a table at the advertising agency or in the boardroom view dads. And it may be that dads aren't the ones making the final purchasing decision, but that doesn't mean you need to make fun of them in the commercial to get a laugh. And I see very few of those types of commercials anymore. That was an example. There were several others kind of at the time, right, that really were the same, had that same tone. Mm-hmm. And I think brands now recognize there's no reason to make one of these ads anymore, because they know they're going to get complaints from men and women on Facebook and Twitter and everything else. So it's a little bit of a win. A lot of people kind of laugh and say, is that really a big deal? Is that really something you should spend your time on? And perhaps in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal, but I do believe that popular culture has an influence on how people view themselves, how people view the people around us. So right. I think it makes a difference, and chipping away at these silly stereotypes over time, I think has helped move the conversation forward.
All right. Well, speaking of moving the conversation forward, you mentioned Dad 2.0. I have thought about doing a dad blog. Is the space too crowded? Is there room for more? I bought the URL. I hope I don't kill it.com.
There you go. There's never too many dads out there sharing their story, and we have our own blog on our site, and we've got a podcast where we're all about dads sharing their story. And the great thing is you are becoming a dad in a different time than the bloggers that started 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So you're coming at fatherhood from a totally different perspective. I think the thing that I have seen change is Dad 2.0 Summit used to be a place for dad bloggers and brands to connect and talk about kind of branding and marketing, but also to talk about fatherhood. And we're still talking about fatherhood, but we're talking about it as YouTubers and Instagrammers and bloggers still. There's all sorts of different ways to put your fatherhood and stories of fatherhood out there. And brands, I think, are really interested in connecting with dads, because they do recognize that dads are very involved in the decisions in their family now, and they care whether their child is eating Plum Organics, one of our sponsors, foods, or using water wipes, another one of our sponsors wipes. Like, dads actually care about the products that they're using on their kids, and I think brands are recognizing that.
Nice. It brings up a question. I know there's sensitivity about the privacy of a child when you're talking about portraying yourself or your family online. I know you guys probably don't have like a strong like point of view on that, like as an organization, or maybe you do, but how do you think about that, whether you decide what to put online or not? Because I know it can be sensitive and there's some privacy concerns.
Yeah, I think every blogger, Instagrammer, YouTuber, even individual person posting on Facebook has to make that choice of what they're comfortable with. I think my perspective, I live in New York City, is different than perspective of somebody who lives in a suburban area. If it's clear where your child goes to school and where your child lives and all of that, you might be in a different situation than me living in a city of 9 million people with everybody and their brother walking down the street and all sorts of things that could happen. So I don't particularly worry about kind of what's online about my family. I feel like it's inevitable at some point. I think the one thing that I consider more as my kids get older, they're 12 and 9 now, is really getting their permission and what they're comfortable with. It used to be that I'd be posting pictures of our family online and just assume that they were fine with it, but this is their digital footprint that I'm creating as well, and potentially their future employers, or as they apply to college or they apply for jobs, even now, or as they even go a few years from now. We're creating a digital footprint, and I want them to be part of it. We are living in the 21st century, and they are learning about digital citizenship at school and learning about their own social media. But I think as parents, especially as they get older, we need to think about the footprint we're creating and start to get their buy-in as they get older.
All right, that makes sense. So shifting back to the City Dads group, how have you seen like the power of tribe help men evolve, and how in what ways do you see that happening?
Men are not good at creating a tribe anymore for some reason, especially after we get married, after we start to have kids. Like, we lose our tribe. Most of us don't stay connected to our friends from high school or our friends from college. We're often moving to new cities where we don't know anybody, and it becomes all about work and our relationship. So for good or bad, we don't have bowling league anymore, and we don't go play golf with our buddies on a Saturday. There's no more Elks Club, or maybe there are Elks Clubs out there, but I don't know about them. So I think something tragic is happening, in that men don't have friendships anymore, and they have lost connection. We've had many guys come to our meetups and say, this is the first time I've been out since we've had a kid, or it's been, I remember a guy not too long ago, it had been 5 years since he had gone out by himself.
Whoa.
Without, like, in the evening, just for beers, without his partner. So I think that's been the most striking, is to kind of create a place that people are comfortable with. Spouses are comfortable with the fact that it's a group of dads that are getting together to connect. Society, for whatever reason, seems more comfortable with a group of dads gathering versus a group of men gathering. And I think there's a look that needs to be taken at that. Why are women allowed to gather and have deep friendships, but men not so much? We have to look at ourselves first and foremost. But it's also just great to have some other guys to talk to about what you're feeding your kids. What research did you do before you chose a preschool for your child? How did you think about standardized tests as your kids were moving or getting older? So that, I think, dads, we have a perspective. It's nice to have kind of the wide perspective. I think one of the cool things about our group as well is that we really are dads of all stripes. We've got uh, at-home dads and working dads, gay dads and straight dads, married dads and single dads, dads across the economic spectrum and racial spectrum. We've got this kind of one tie, one bond of fatherhood that ties us together, and it really is neat. I would not know the diversity of people if it weren't for creating and helping to build this community of dads in New York City. And I'll say it's been amazing to meet and connect with dads across the country. I grew up in Colorado, so I'm not a New Yorker, but I live in New York, and probably anywhere you live, you kind of get in this bubble.
Right.
And to now meet dads from Cincinnati or from Columbus, Ohio, or from Detroit, California, you really do get a different perspective, and you're kind of reminded that even though the world is so divided right now, there's so much that we can still have in common and talk about and have civil discussions about. So it's been great.
Yeah, no, I think it's beautiful, and I can attest to someone that even prior to being a dad, growing further away from high school and college, just new friendships becoming harder and harder to form, and that I can see that dad bond giving you that opportunity to really address that in a way when you actually need it the most. So I'm looking forward to joining up soon. So you mentioned you're in 34 cities. What can somebody do if they don't see a city dads group in their city? Do they reach out to you? Do they start one on their own? How does the new process work?
We do have a tab on our website called Start a Group that kind of explains the kind of what we're trying to do and the pieces of the puzzle that we're trying to put together. I think one piece of our model that limits us to some degree is the fact that we're really trying to create groups in metropolitan cities, kind of big metropolitan areas. So I'd say the only times we're saying flat out no are times where somebody comes to us and wants to start the Boulder Dads group versus the Denver Dads group. We already have a Denver Dads group that covers all the way from, or is intended to cover all the way from Colorado Springs up to Fort Collins and Boulder. And we don't start groups in small towns. We try to be as supportive as we can. But we are creating this kind of organization that we're all connected, and financially we are kind of investing in each of these groups. So we're trying to invest in places that have a sizable population of dads that can join, and dads that are willing to come from far and wide to connect with other dads.
All right. Awesome. Before we wrap up, anything else that we want to touch on that you think's good to mention about city dads or the evolution of men as fathers?
I mean, I'll just go back to it again. And this is a great time to be a dad, where we are caregiver, we can be breadwinner, we can be great husband, great partner, and thinking about all of that all of those roles can be very stressful. It takes a lot of thought, but I think it really gives us some meaning in our life beyond just being the paycheck that some men, I think, kind of found. That's the role we found ourselves in for too long, and it's really nice to be in this place where we get to have more to us than just our work.
Yep. No, I think that's beautiful. And I applaud you guys for the work that you do, bringing people together and creating this conversation. I think it's nice to know that that's out there, and tough to imagine a world where you don't have that type of opportunity out there. So, appreciate the work you do, and also for making some time for me today.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for creating this very smart group of people. And I look forward to hearing from all the guys you've collected.